Up everyone and welcome back to the second mission of the Task Force 369 campaign for the Lessons Learned part. Needless to say, spoilers ahead, so if you don't want to know the ins and outs of the Outskirts mission, then go watch this. This one is a bit more difficult than the after action report for the first mission because, well, less went wrong. Like I pointed out in the video, going left or going right simply didn't add up as reasonable options in my opinion, and while my approach up the centre wasn't a fantastic option either, I was leading with my infantry and always retained the flexibility to switch flanks by keeping the Brads and the Strikers to hand. That said, one of the reasons I opted for the centre was because of the way I wanted to handle the battle. If I was going to advance in the open on either flank, then I'd have this difficult choice between keeping my infantry mounted or dismounted. Dismounted, they'd be able to push up, do some recce, clear the route of any lurking anti-tank teams, but in my opinion there's really not enough cover and concealment to keep the foot sluggers safe, given the sheer number of potential enemy positions and the height advantage the defenders would get from all these apartment blocks. To some extent, it doesn't matter too much if you have the fire support standing by to back you up. If the enemy gets the first shot off and causes casualties, then you've got casualties, and I simply wasn't in a position to accept any losses. But going in mounted would probably be even worse. If the infantry are all buttoned up in their transports, then I've lost a lot of spotting potential. The vehicles might have snazzy kit like high-powered optics and thermal sights, but thermals can't see through walls or glass, and fundamentally having 3 pairs of eyes with restricted vision is going to make for far worse spotting than 9 pairs of eyes with unrestricted vision, plus the 3 pairs of eyes still in transport. Plus there's the added fun of a transport vehicle getting hit when the passengers are inside, and I've had enough of that. Again, there's a lot of firing positions for enemy anti-tank weapons, and we saw in Strength of Power in the last video how RPGs and things arcing down onto a Bradley, for example, from a tall building have a real good chance of totally missing the explosive reactive armour. Yes, some of my vehicles have APS, an active protection system, and it did work on 2 occasions, but I'm sticking to my guns by treating APS as a kind of bonus. I don't want to get into a state of relying on it to keep me safe, because that's just going to lead me into taking chances that I shouldn't be doing. So, bearing that in mind, out on the flanks I have this awkward question of, do I dismount my infantry or not? And as it happened, there probably weren't enough Russians about to cause me any major problems. The ones who were around weren't in a really good enough condition in terms of equipment and morale to put up effective resistance. But the kicker is, of course, that I didn't know that at the time, and it's probably not a very smart assumption to make. In the centre, meanwhile, there is no 50-50 about keeping the troops buttoned up in the transports. Because it's urban terrain, the infantry need to be out of their transports and moving ahead of the vehicles to keep enemy anti-tank teams at arm's length, and to take advantage of the concealment offered by all the buildings. And again, that idea fed into how I wanted to fight the battle. I felt that I couldn't afford to just waltz right in with guns blazing from the start. I wanted to have a rolling recce screen with teeth. It's the usual sensible advice to move forward and try and make contact with the enemy with the smallest force possible, wedded to the modern technological bonuses of precision artillery and ATGMs. In the entire mission, the enemy won 1 firefight, and that was when I walked a javelin team directly into the sights of a BMP-3. So you'd expect them to win that one. The rest of the time, even if Ivan got the drop on me because of the slow and steady approach, because I was concertinaing my way up the map, I was always in a position to dominate any enemy infantry who opened up. Even though I was moving forward, I was very careful to make sure I had 1 foot on the ground all the time. So if anything went wrong, if I got surprised, I had the firepower there waiting to back me up. And that's all without mentioning the javelin, which remains the tank killer extraordinaire for the American infantry. Given all the concealment offered by all the buildings here, it was the easiest thing in the world to sneak a javelin team into position and just knock out Russian tanks and BMPs pretty much at will. In fact, this really was an infantry focused battle. Unlike the first mission where the Abrams and the Bradleys dominated, here they really took a back seat. Plenty of fire support from them, but it's the infantry who did all the work and most of the killing. On to the enemy, and specifically the surprisingly large Russian force still kicking at the end of the game. All the way from the start, I was focused on the 2 enemy observation posts at the back left of the map. Those are my 2 objectives. They were worth the most points, they were the most important objective in terms of the bigger picture, and by choosing the focus on them, I could also reduce the amount of map and therefore the size of the Russian force I would actually have to deal with. So, to me, all those Russians still hanging around at the end are a sign of success. I didn't have to take the risk of engaging them to achieve my objectives, so I didn't. Just because they're there doesn't mean I have to fight them. Whether I could have done is a different question, and I have to admit that I left the original understrength Bradley platoon lurking at the back in some not very effective fire positions once I brought the strikers over and the striker infantry platoon could take the lead. In theory, I could have moved my Bradley infantry up, kept the reconnaissance going up through the centre or maybe onto the right while I focused left on the OPs, but I don't really see what I would gain. It's not very sensible to go out picking fights you don't have to, and while there is the potential that I might not have killed enough Russians, destroyed enough Russian forces to get the points for that, focusing on one area at a time meant that I could concentrate my forces and just snuff Ivan's positions out one by one. Given more time, I might have come into contact with more Russians as I went for the remaining enemy OP, but looking at the terrain, I think I'd probably be able to take them out pretty piecemeal and destroy them in detail. Overall, with the exception of the Javelin team meets BMP3 incident on the right, all the mistakes I made were technical errors. So the ruined double ambush on the T-90 and the Tunguska in the centre, for example, might well have been due to me mucking up the orders somehow, and those trigger-happy little pixel truppen might not have been restricted by a target arc when they decided to open up. The intent, the concept was solid, I just screwed up the actual execution. And in a lot of respects, I'd have more to talk about here if I had made more mistakes, or perhaps I made plenty of mistakes that the AI wasn't able to take advantage of and I've avoided some deserved punishment. We'll see. But on the whole, I'm very happy with how I did there. It's a little bit different for me going for the slow and steady. I'd much rather just get in there and hit the enemy as hard, as fast as possible, but the circumstances here really necessitated against that kind of approach. So I've had to branch out a little bit. Like the last after action, guys, any questions, anything I've missed, anything you want to add, leave a comment. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll catch you in the next video.